Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eusebiu Catana. I'm Senior Manager in an Innovation and Deployment Department at ATICO and 5G LOGINNOV Project Coordinator. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 5G Impact in Maritime Connectivity online series organized by BS Group. As you know, the adoption of 5G technology has the potential to revolutionize the shipping industry. By providing faster and more reliable connectivity, 5G can enable new applications and services that improve operational efficiency, safety, and customer experience. Online series bring together industry experts, researchers, practitioners in order to discuss the latest development, challenges, and potential opportunities in 5G for the shipping industry. Today, we'll have interesting presentations and discussions. You are kindly asked to add your questions via Q&A sections. All the questions will be answered by our expert speakers. Before to continue, I would like to introduce the 5G LOGINNOV project. And I will start with a short overview. I will introduce you a number of use cases. I will present results and also the impact and short conclusions. So 5G LOGINNOV project, it's an Horizon 2020 project, started in October 2020 and involve 15 members from 7 different countries and 3 pilot sites. There are involved different stakeholders covering very well 5G domain, automotive, telecom, logistics, and also infrastructure operators and research institutes. What is very important to highlight during my presentations, we organized during the 5G LOGINNOV project an open call in order to select 5 innovative SMEs. So these SMEs already started to work with us and they integrated their use cases in the 5G framework that have been developed during the 5G LOGINNOV project. So here you are, the 5G LOGINNOV consortium. So covering very well the telecom industry, automotive industry, IT system integrators, service providers, research entities, and SMEs. As you know very well, when we are talking about logistic industry as vertical, supply chain efficiency largely depends upon data and information. So how the data are collected, processed, stored, updated, interpreted, understood, and exploited. So at the operational level, all stakeholders involved need real-time information. So in order to be able to make effective decisions. If we move one step further on tactical and strategic level, all stakeholders involved in the transport logistics, the port stakeholder systems need increased connectivity. As you know, existing systems are currently not linked to each other and thus missing the opportunity to optimize the performances of their cooperation. So it's a huge need of new solutions for connectivity, for transport and logistics, for maritime industries, with different characteristics, intra and cross companies for immediate real-time exchange of information. In the last years, from the logistics side, and then we move to the 5G side, they will develop many logistics services, such as data exchange, estimated time of arrivals, control tower services, ECMR, so e-consignment note, port services, CO2 monitoring services, and so on. And what else? And we identify, of course, that 5G is the enabler for future services for port, maritime, and logistics stakeholders. In 5G LOGINNOV, we propose a solution, of course, to a framework to implement a 5G and connected and automated driving terminals, new type of IoT connectivity devices, and of course, the main target for our project, of course, is to develop this framework test and validate by 3 pilot sites. So in 5G LOGINNOV, there are 3 ports as pilot. So Hamburg in Germany, Luka Koper in Slovenia, and today you will see the showcase from Luka Koper pilot, and in Piraeus, Athens. 5G LOGINNOV central innovation is to build a first-class European industrial supply site for 5G core technologies and new IoT 5G devices. The project, of course, will have a very strong impact in the logistic industry. So we will implement 11 different use cases related to ports, related to 5G for automation for port services. As I already highlighted, we opened the door to 5G SMEs to test their use cases in the 5G ecosystem that have been developed by those 3 pilot sites. 5G LOGINNOV, of course, when we're talking about new technologies, we're talking about new applications, of course, we should have in our mind new business models. So it's very important to bring new ideas, new solutions for future investors, because always during our events organized at different congresses, world congresses, so last year, this year, we received questions from potential investors, and they said, look, we are able to invest in new technologies, 5G related, beyond 5G, 6G candidates technology for maritime and ports, because for us, these stakeholders represent an important market. But in the same time, we should learn how we get return of investment. When I'm talking about interoperability, it's very important to have in our mind the standards, to develop standards and to contribute to developing such standards. I will present a real example in my presentation. So we already developed a standard for CO2 monitoring, and I'll give you more details in one of my next slides. It's very important, of course, to support the 5G PPP partners and all frameworks related. Because the aim, as you know very well, at the European level, is to build a single digital market. And transport verticals, maritime industry represent one of the main pillars. Now I will introduce you the 5G LOGINNOV project. I will give you several details about the use cases, about the application that have been implemented by those 3 pilot sites. In the same time, of course, in the presentation of Luka Koper, you will see more details regarding the Luka Koper pilot site. So the project aim, it was to design an innovative framework of 5G-enabled connected and automated mobility technology inside and outside of ports. So I'm referring not only to the port area, but also to hinterland area. And here, the best case is Hamburg. Our aim it was to develop 5G-enabled ports and logistic hub operations. One important service is to integrate 5G for the predictive maintenance, to anticipate breakdowns for all machines and equipment from the port areas. In the hinterland area, and not only, we implement a use case, so a track platoon, so-called Green Initiative track platoon, from hinterland to port and from port to hinterland. So hinterland is outside of the port area. And we also implement a track platoon using an optimized traffic light solution, so-called GLOSA, in order to have a sustainable traffic management in the hinterland area, in the city, and also around the port area. The main use cases which are implemented in Hamburg, of course, it's a floating track and emission data for the automated track platoon. In Athens, the main use cases are related to remote automation, 5G communication in port, and predictive maintenance. In Luka Koper, Today you'll see more. Janez will give more details. You'll see 5G-based V2X data exchange services for surveillance data for yard, truck, and logistics. When we propose these solutions, of course, we had in our mind which kind of benefits we expect from this investment, from this project. We expect important benefits, and I will give you several examples in my one of my next slides. Reduction of CO2 and NOx will also boost the solutions, so automation for ports and for hinterland areas based on the 5G technology. And last but not least, new kind of business models should be implemented by all stakeholders interested to invest in this domain. When we are, you know very well, when we are investing and we promote new technologies, there are a number of challenges related to the market, because, you know, cargo port operators are under a very high pressure to comply with increasingly stricter environmental regulations and societal view for sustainable operations. During the peak times, during the peak hours, of course, it's a huge challenge to manage the delay, because we have this capacity problem and traffic congestions around of the port area. Reducing cost operation for infrastructure and investment using innovative solutions. So it's very important to have in our mind before to design any potential project, all these future operating costs. How to improve the port operation in order to protect infrastructure assets, and how, for instance, services like predictive maintenance are implemented. So it's very important to highlight all these aspects, because we have seen during the project development, the use cases, integration and implementation, this type of challenges. Digital transformation, it's one of our strategic goal for all member states. We should make optimum use of 5G capabilities for yard operation and hinterland connectivities, because many ports, of course, are located in the city areas or nearby the cities. And it's very important to see how, for instance, different services related to hinterland can be integrated in the ports and from the port to the hinterland area. So the proposed solution that will bring, it's to build 5G port and logistic operation systems using automation, connected vehicles, and at the same time, innovative IoT sensor platforms. And you'll see real examples when Janez will present the solution implemented in European maritime ports. And Luca Copper, I think it's a very good showcase. I included in my presentation results, because always I receive questions during the different European events or event organized world congresses. So I included a number of results, especially from the Hamburg area, from the hinterland and port, because we have a mixed approach in the Hamburg. And I included here results related, of course, to cooperative driving using the platoon solutions, and also how different information exchange between a group of course, vehicles supporting V2X applications. What is very important to highlight during our projects, so not only 5G LOGINNOV, but before 5G LOGINNOV, we also developed an ISO standard. So this ISO standard 235795 for carbon monitoring, because, you know, you have heard in many presentations during many events how to reduce CO2, how to reduce NOx, but less discussions about how to measure CO2, how to measure NOx using an agnostic solution, a neutral approach. So we developed this standard we started the development one project before 5G LOGINNOV, and we continue in 5G LOGINNOV. And last year in May, it was granted ISO standard using nomadic devices for carbon monitoring. And now in 5G LOGINNOV, we integrated using an V2X environment and for a large scale, so like Hamburg area. So behind of this, of course, standard, we develop also tool, so-called for low carbon monitoring system for impact assessment. I included here many results from our test from Hamburg. We also presented in May during the ITS European Congress showcases and real demonstration, online demonstration. We also present online demonstrations during the 5G LOGINNOV final event that will take place this year in Luca Koper on the 7th of November. So if you are interested to see all applications that have been developed in 5G LOGINNOV for 3 ports, please join this event on 7th of November in Luca Koper. So here I included, of course, a scheme how it was done, this implementation in Hamburg area. So we included a number of vehicles. So there are involved Deutsche Telekom, Svarco, Continental. They provided the technology for autonomous driving for truck platoon. We integrated in the hinterland area, so and port areas in Hamburg. We did also a real demonstration during the Hamburg ITS Congress. And we also have a number of documents available for those which are interested to learn more from our project. So I presented a number of details regarding the 5G, regarding the logistics. I presented an example from our implementations. Now I would like to summarize, for instance, which 5G aspects are covered by all these 3 ports, which are representing the 5G LOGINNOV pilot sites. So one use case, and maybe you'll see in the Janez presentation, of course, 3D video, which is very important for security. We also integrated a 5G-enabled precise positioning mobile edge computing server in Hamburg, because when we implement truck platoons, it's very important to implement at the same time the precise positioning, because if you have if you use just only GPS or only Galileo, and there are also a number of, let's say, challenges regarding, of course, the tunneling, if you are driving within the cities and there are tall buildings. So it's very important to integrate these specific solutions. Real tracking and for end-to-end enhanced visibility in the port areas, in the hinterland areas for different machines which are used for automation. Self-autonomous driving cars when I'm talking about truck platoons. So it's very important, these aspects. And it's not possible to implement if you don't implement ultra-reliable and low-latency communications. Also, when I'm talking about so many IoT devices, so many equipment which are used in port areas, so massive machine type communications are also considered and implemented. So it's very important to take into account a number of lessons learned about the technology, how these technologies supported the development and implementation of new solutions in order to support the business development for ports and to improve and to have more efficient solutions for ports. Regarding the impact, of course, I included here only, let's say, 5 potential main impacts. So mostly related, of course, to business, logistic hub, ports operators, to network and telecom operators, also to SMEs, innovative SMEs and startups. Regarding the 5G PPP, and of course, policy and future regulatory things. When I'm talking about business logistic hub management operators, so we have learned that this new technology will bring opportunities to enhance the value of the third-party services. We also learned that new solutions, of course, are needed for ports operations and logistics. When we propose to organize an open call in order to select 5 SMEs and startups, of course, we had in our mind how, for instance, we can open the market for new entities, for new stakeholders, to create a market, and at the same time to see how we are able to identify real market and opportunities for applications, targeted niches on that market. How, for instance, will be possible to customize in different use cases 5G portfolio of product and services for port, logistics, and security on that niche of the market. Regarding the network and telecom operators, because we need 5G operators, so in all areas, so in Germany is Deutsche Telekom, in Luka Koper is Telekom Slovenia, and in Athens is Vodafone. So it's very important to identify together with them and also to work with them, because if we don't build this type of relationship among all stakeholders, at the end of the day, we'll not be able to implement. So we need support for 5G connectivity, and also it's possible, if possible, to build new partnership and also to involve this in this partnership innovative entities. When I'm talking about 5G PPP and future, of course, development regarding the standards, regarding the operability. So it's very important, of course, to use the current results as lesson learned, to exploit the results, and also to see how can be further used in the next 5G PPP phases. So regarding the EU policy and the future, of course, regulatory things. So in all our projects, at least, we propose a cross-sectorial nature of the 5G technologies and also the services related to ports, related to maritime industry, related to logistics. And always when we are presenting our results, at the end, we present lesson learned and a number of potential recommendations from our industrial partners. So very important to highlight all these lessons learned, because for the next project, for the next investment, we should consider, of course, what it was done in the previous project, in the previous investment. 5G LOGINNOV will play an important role for future of logistics, because when we involve a number of data providers, always they ask it about trust. How is possible to build a trustworthy environment? How, for instance, the data will be used for the right purpose, and at the same time, the data consumer must fully accept the data owner's usage policy. New business ecosystem, because when we're implementing new technology, we should have in our mind, of course, new innovative solution for port operations and logistics. Before, of course, we should take into account how we'll find and identify real market opportunities, and especially in target niches for the SMEs. Regarding the scalability, it's very important, of course, to have in our mind a number of standards to assure interoperability, because at least in our project, of course, there are different variants regarding the telecom vendors, and it's very important to have this full interoperability. We also included a cross-pilot site testing activity in 5G LOGINNOV. So the setups from Athens and Hamburg will be tested in Luka Koper, and from Luka Koper will be the setup will be tested in the other two pilots. So it's very important to assure this type of interoperability and to demonstrate that, of course, doesn't matter which kind of equipment from different vendors, we solve these important requirements. We're also talking when our developing and implementing services. Of course, we have in our mind new kind of services. So we have so-called value-adding apps, which include different services for data processing, data format alignment, and also data exchange protocol. We have the ambitions, of course, to create a new market, a data market. Okay, and in our opinion, 5G LOGINNOV enables the creation of this new data-driven services market, cross-sectorial nature of 5G core technology, and also to use and implement innovative applications and services. Last but not least, we have a target according to the Green Deal to achieve the CO2 neutrality until 2050. And if we not implement an ICT infrastructure, so we are using the physical internet, this in order to support operations in the future logistic networks, will not be able to achieve this target. So it's very important that all projects will contribute, so as building blocks, to develop this future pan-European ICT infrastructure and to have built a physical internet for logistic network. Upcoming events, we'll attend, of course, the ITS World Congress in China, and also I already highlighted the 5G LOGINNOV final event in Luca Koper on the 7th of November. Of course, you can follow us on different media channels, and if you have questions, you can contact us directly. So thank you very much. If there are questions. If not, that I propose to continue with our next presentation, Introduction to Maritime 5G. And Dr. Stig Petersen will present the next presentation. Dr. Petersen is a senior scientist at SINTEF Digital, where his area of research is communications. His main focus is on wireless and industrial communication system for using monitoring, control, and safety applications. His work comprises theoretical evaluation, laboratory and field tests, industrial pilots, as well as technology qualification. So Dr. Petersen primarily works with solution providers and end users within offshore energy and maritime domains. In the last years, he has specialized in industrial 5G, identifying application and use cases for both public and private 5G infrastructure. He's currently the project manager of the Maritime 5G project, a Norwegian national research project with Kongsberg Maritime and SINTEF. So the primary objective of this project is to identify and develop business cases and technical specifications for maritime 5G-based solutions and implement pilot application to be demonstrated in realistic environment. So Dr. Petersen, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you for a nice introduction, and hello everybody. So after Mr. Catana's excellent presentation on the LOGINNOV project dealing with 5G in harbors, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to introduce some of the 5G technology and why that's suddenly so interesting for the different verticals and what's different from 4G to 5G. I'm going to look into the difference between public networks and private networks, which is something new in 5G as well. And at the end, give you some examples on some of the benefits 5G might have within maritime applications. So to start, just to have a common framework, a mobile network consists primarily of three components, if you simplify it a bit. You have the user equipment, which traditionally have been a cell phone or a mobile phone. This is changing now that this is getting industrial use and maritime use. So a ship, for example, could be a user equipment connecting to a shore network, or you could have an AGV or an autonomous truck or a crane on a harbor operation, for example. The 5G network itself consists of a series of interconnected base stations called radio access network. These are typically spread geographically to cover an entire area, and it's individual per country, so you have national infrastructure. These interconnected base stations or radio access network components are typically controlled from a centralized core network that handles billing and network management and subscriptions and things like that. So in each country, in Norway, for example, we have 3 operators that each have their individual national infrastructure. So we actually have triple redundancy with mobile network infrastructure in Norway. In other countries, you might have double or triple or maybe even quadruple some places. And these are handled by mobile network operators. That was mentioned briefly in the previous presentations. You have T-Mobile, you have Vodafone, you have Deutsche Telekom, Verizon. There are different operators depending on which country you're in. So that's the foundation of the 5G networks that we're going to use within the maritime setting to see what has happened in 5G and why is 5G suddenly getting so much interest in different verticals, and because that has changed since 4G. So I'm going to look into some of the novelties in 5G and why they are of interest from an industrial point of view. So the first one and the most simple one, so to speak, I've just called it faster 4G, is that 5G will provide higher data rates and also lower latency for more users in a limited area compared to 4G. So if you look at this typical three-part structure that I said, there's an innovation on the radio part in the communication between the user equipment and the radio access network. That's called enhanced mobile broadband. And this new radio technology actually gives higher data rates and provides more capacity for user equipment. So now they say that if you're in a football match or in a stadium watching some sort of sport event and the sport event is quite boring, everybody present could watch a movie on Netflix instead, is what they're saying with the capacity. So that's the first innovation, and the short name for that is EMBB, Enhanced Mobile Broadband, which you saw as part of the triangle showed in the previous presentation as one of the three corners. The second corner in that triangle has to do with Internet of Things. So 5G will develop radio specifications that can support a large amount of wireless sensors that should have long battery life and a good communication range for IoT applications, so to gather different sensor data. So in this scenario, you actually switch the traditional user equipment from a cell phone to some sort of IoT sensor or IoT device. And then there will be, again, a new radio interface, a new way of communicating between the IoT sensors and the radio access network. And this new radio specification or this new application area is called the massive machine type communication, or short form MMTC. And that was the second corner in the triangle showed in the previous presentation. And the final triangle, which was also mentioned, is what I have called industrial communication. So 5G will offer wireless communication with very high reliability and very low latency for industrial applications such as control and autonomy. And here, the traditional use case that is used to signify this part of the 5G triangle is a mobile robot in a factory floor, for example. Could also be an autonomous crane or a vehicle operating on a harbor logistics side. And again, there's a new radio interface between the mobile robot and the radio access network. And this one is called Ultra Reliable Low Latency Communication, or URLLC. So those are the three corners of the triangle of 5G. And what's important to notice here that these three applications, enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine type communication, and ultra reliable low latency communication, that's three different radio specifications. So you cannot have everything at once. You cannot have a very high capacity or high bandwidth combined with very low latency and high reliability. And you cannot have very long battery life and IoT aspects combined with, for example, high capacity. So there are some trade-offs involved in the radio part of the specifications. So you have these three different applications areas, which I've gone through now. In addition, on the quality of service side, there's something brand new in 5G compared to 4G. And that is that 5G, with 5G, the network operator, you can go into a service level agreement where you have a guaranteed quality of service of your system or your application in the public network. And this they do by segregating different applications in the network. So for example, if you have this mobile robot that I mentioned before, this one probably needs very low latency. And if you want to have 3D camera that was mentioned, for example, so you may also need pretty high capacity. So then it's possible to enter an agreement with the mobile network operator and getting your dedicated part of the resources of the radio access network earmarked for your application. So regardless of how many other users are in the vicinity using the same base station as you are still guaranteed your capacity as per your agreement with the operator. So with some innovations on the RAN side and also on the core network side, you can get what's called network slicing. So your mobile robot get a dedicated resource called a slice, regardless of any other users in the area. So if you remember from 4G and traditional cell phones, for example, if you are at a concert venue or somewhere where there are lots of people, you're all fighting for the same resources. And there's no priority of traffic, so everybody gets a small piece of the available resources. But with this quality of service innovation, if you are a factory or a harbor wanting your part of the public network, you can enter agreements and get a reserved piece of the available resources. So that's the innovations in 4G, seen from the public network side and the mobile operator perspective. In addition, there's a new, let's say, concept being introduced in 5G, which are called private 5G networks. Some people also call them non-public networks, which are networks that are not part of the public or the national infrastructure. So it is possible for nations on a country-by-country level to allocate some frequencies to private actors for local use in what's typically are geographically limited areas. So in Norway, for example, we have 3 mobile network operators that may or may not be familiar to you, but it's ICE, Telenor, and Telia. So and they all have nationwide coverage. So this is Norway. So we actually have a triple redundant mobile network infrastructure in our large country with not so many inhabitants. For some reason. But in addition to this public nationwide network, it's also possible for any company or organization, if you're a factory, if you're a harbor, a hospital, or you do media production, or you're on a construction site, you can contact the authorities and you can purchase a license for some private 5G frequencies that you can use for your own systems in your own places. So if you have this traditional view of a mobile robot talking to a control room, you can use the public network as visualized here and get a slice with dedicated resources from the public network. Or you can acquire a private frequency and then purchase your own private RAN or a base station in addition to a local core network. This, of course, has a higher capital expenditure or higher cost, but it gives you more control of your network. You're not part of a public infrastructure. It's a private network you own and also, of course, configure and deploy all parts of your network. So for, let's say, safety applications or applications where information security is of high importance, this could be a very viable alternative, given, of course, that the market is ready for this and that it's easy to purchase, install, deploy, manage, and operate such a network. So I'll get back to that in some application classes where maybe private networks are more favorable for some things, while public networks have their benefits in other use cases. So just some examples from around the world. For some countries where the government actually has dedicated frequencies for these private type of 5G networks for industry and businesses. So as you can see, there's just some example countries. The frequency actually varies from country to country. And you can see Norway and UK are using 3.8 gigahertz to 4.2. And there are some EU initiatives now on actually dedicating this band across the entire European Union region. Anyway, the user equipment and the radio access networks, etc. That radio equipment is equipped to handle all types of frequencies. So most equipment handle most of the frequencies you see here. So that's on the chip level. So it's regardless of the country, you should be able to get equipment that supports your private 5G frequency. Of course, there are many more countries. It's a big job to keep up to date with all these things. But if you have any questions regarding this, you can feel free to contact me and I'll look it up for you to see if your country has a potential for private 5G networks and private frequencies. So finally, going to take a look at some of the applications for maritime 5G, classified into three things. It's ship-to-shore communication, how to communicate from the ship to land, and then on board the ship, and finally something with harbors, which we saw, of course, in much more detail in the previous presentation. So when it comes to ship-to-shore communication, it's of course most relevant to use the public 5G infrastructure in areas where you have coastal near operations. For example, in the picture, we have the Coastal Express in Norway that travels along the whole of the Norwegian coast from south to north. And it's not far from land the whole trip. You can see all the fjords and the nature that you see here. That's a perfect example for using the public 5G infrastructure that's across the whole country. Also for inland waterways on the European continent, it's good to use the public 5G infrastructure that's available. And with this new 5G technology, which gives high capacity with reliable communication with low latency, you can provide, for example, the simple application of internet for crew and passengers. You can have more advanced things like remote control and autonomy, and also fleet control if you're looking into a larger perspective on remote control and remote captain and autonomous ships. And you can do more IoT-related activities, such as sensors for condition monitoring, getting the sensor data to the cloud for more processing onshore. Of course, you could use private 5G networks if you want to go that direction for operations in geographically limited areas, for example, a ferry crossing. If there are not that much range between two parts and crossing a fjord or crossing a wide river or something like that, a private network could work. But of course, for a private network, you need a very limited geographical area to be relevant. If we go on board the ship, now that we're moving towards more remote operations, autonomy, remote operation centers, and putting the captain on land, so to speak, there's the potential of putting a private 5G network on board the ship, completely with a full radio access network component and a local core on the ship. Then you can use this as a building stone for instrumentation, for example, having sensors and actuators in part of the control loops on the ship. You can also use it for the sensors needed for condition monitoring, if you look at the IoT part of 5G. And you can use it for different systems needed when we go to remote control, such as cameras, 3D cameras, LiDAR, radar, and all kinds of information needed to be transmitted from the ship and to the remote operation centers on land, where you have remote captains taking control of the ship. And finally, just some examples from harbors. Here you could either use public or private 5G infrastructure, depending on what you want to do from a business perspective. As we've seen from the previous presentation, it can be used for lots of different logistics and maintenance scenarios. You can use it for crane control if you want to have remote crane operations. And of course, with the transition to remote control and autonomous ships, this 5G can also be used for positioning and communication of sensor data and camera and different things for automatic docking and mooring operations. Yeah, I tried to be quick. We are a bit behind on time, so that's actually what I had. So, Mr. Catana, are there any questions for us, or should we just wait till the end, maybe?
Thank you very much, Dr. Petersen. Yes, that's a very good presentation. So you highlighted, of course, a number of topics related to 5G. more specific to maritime. And also I've seen a number of ideas which are of course complementary with the first presentation. So I think it's a very good this approach, so to have a complementarity approach and to see, of course, from the first project, more focus on the port area, hinterland area, so linked to the city, and from your side, from the port area to the maritime. So I think it's an excellent approach. And I hope that, of course, the attendees enjoyed this type of approach. Now it's time. I didn't see any presentation, so anyway, at the end we have also a question and answer session. So I propose to continue with the next presentation. So I kindly invite Dr. Janez Sterle to present navigating the wave of connectivity, so harnessing 5G technology in European maritime ports. Dr. Sterle is the founder and the CEO of the Internet Institute from Slovenia. His main technical domain is concerning with the network and services design, planning, and implementation in production network of 5G, beyond the 5G system, and vertical specific mission critical communication. He holds various patents in the field of mobile system and has an established track record of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe projects, so such as, of course, 5G LOGINNOV, INT 5G Gantt, 5G GASP, Evolve 5G, 5G Induce, 5G ANA, Matilda 5G, 6G, and production grade project in various industrial sectors. He cooperates on a continuous basis with our respective industry, practitioners, regulatory and legislative body on strategic and technical level of expertise. So, Dr. Sterle, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you again for this really nice presentation. So my name is Janez Sterle, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to address you on a topic of 5G and its use in the maritime ports. But let me first give you some of my background. I'm leading a team of young entrepreneurs based in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Our core business is in providing reliable and resilient 5G products and services for various vertical sectors such as sports, safety, Industry 4.0, and other industrial domains. Our, let's say, main strength is in this established partnership ecosystem. We are a trusted research and innovation partner with a proven track record in EU-driven 5G development. So currently we are collaborating in 6 ongoing 5G projects where we tailor, let's say, our 5G portfolio to meet the requirements of the most demanding industries. We have also started with the 6G development, so I hope I will be able to give you today a lot of insight about the latest development and practices which are used in this ecosystem. But let's go back to today's topics. Why is 5G so important for the ports? So ports serve as a, let's say, crucial gateway for international trade, supporting the movements of goods, people, and resources. Actually, over 70% of EU import and export relies on ports, as such making them really vital infrastructure. They are actually one of the most important critical infrastructure in the EU from this perspective. So I'm sure that you have heard that 5G brings a revolution to ports, but what are really these key areas which should be addressed with 5G? If I do in short summary, because we are lacking on time, 5G should transform ports through digitalization, automation, adaptability, and sustainability. It must bring this EU-wide TENT compliance, enhance cybersecurity, and of course, sure, enable these green practices. The future of the ports should be powered, of course, which are powered with 5G, must, of course, revolutionize operation to be efficient, connected, green, and at the end, sustainable in the long run. So let's do a deep dive to see what actually 5G offers and what are the technologies which are, let's say, on the table now. With the networks and, let's say, with network and compute slicing, port can, let's say, allocate dedicated resources for different ports and logistic applications. As we have heard, precise positioning can enable accurate tracking of port equipment and, of course, the cargo. Orchestration mechanism can streamline workflows, enhance the speed of system deployment, application, different components, etc. If you're talking about cloud-native infrastructure, this can ensure, let's say, scalability and cost-effectiveness. I'm pretty much sure you have heard about unmanned aerial system with 5G connectivity, which is enabled. So basically, they enable real-time remote monitoring and surveillance. 5G also provides mission-critical capabilities, resilience for the crucial port operation, etc., etc. And at the end, finally, 5G follows the global standard. This is something which is not trivial stuff. This happened actually in 4G. So with 5G, we are able to facilitate seamless communication with international ports on a global actually scale. So Mr. Catana already presented what is the 5G LOGINNOV project about. I will go one step further and give you more technical insights. As explained, to fully exploit potential and current 5G capabilities, we have built 3 living labs that are directly targeting port and internet operations, maritime and logistics domain. So in my case, I'm leading 5G development in Copper Living Lab, which is, let's say, inside of the port, where we are targeting to improve 5G, let's say, improve with 5G logistic process, support automation of port services, and provide mission-critical applications. As you can see here on the figure, our primary objective in our living lab is to validate the capabilities of 5G technologies through challenging port use cases. This includes 5G and AI-assisted logistic process, 5G and AI-assisted safety and security surveillance, telematic metering, etc., etc. So we are also looking ahead, also as mentioned by a previous speaker. Our future target is to implement remote crane control over the 5G. So with all these use cases and this approach will provide to us a clear understanding of the current state of the 5G capabilities and assess the maturity of the technologies, such, let's say, or components which were already mentioned, enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine types, ultra-reliable communications, etc. So it will enable us to evaluate the potential of these 5G capabilities and their applicability, of course, in practice in the port environment. So let's explore further our use cases to see how we actually converge 5G cloud technologies, industrial IoT, and AI analytics. In the first use case, port infrastructure, including cranes, was equipped with UHD cameras that capture real-time images. These images are seamlessly transmitted over the 5G network to AI analytics, which is located in our port cloud. So the idea is to leverage the power of AI. So this analytics platform actually, let's say, provide us or conduct the tasks such as identifying container markers, detecting structural damages, monitoring of seal presence in the containers, etc. So by automating these processes, accuracy can be improved, operations are, let's say, could be faster, and manual effort, let's say, are significantly, let's say, reduced. In the second use case, which is presented here, port trucks are monitored through the deployed IoT devices, let's say, which are targeting telematics. So these IoT devices are integrated into port terminal trucks to support collecting and transmitting this telemetry information in real time over the 5G network to the analytics in the port cloud. So what's the idea? Port operations can make more informed decisions, operate fleet management, and enhance actually overall operational efficiency because they are collecting the KPIs, metrics in real time from the port fleet. So the third use case, in this case, we introduce 5G connectivity or 5G connected body-worn streaming cameras for security personnel and teams inside of the port. So cameras can transmit real-time video streams, empowering security personnel to monitor and respond swiftly, let's say, to different incidents which can occur in the port. Also, drone-based surveillance is another exciting, let's say, application which is enabled by the 5G. So drone camera again capture and stream live video feed over the 5G network, providing this comprehensive aerial view of the port. So this aerial surveillance enhances security coverage and enables this rapid response, let's say, to potential threats which can happen, let's say, in that kind of environment. And in addition, to streamline security process, techniques are integrated in the port cloud infrastructure. So these techniques automate video streams analysis, which happens actually in real time. And in this case, they offer, let's say, this valuable insight and enhanced security operations in the port. Features like presence detection, object detection, classification, let's say, of different, let's say, elements which can occur in the port further enhance these security measures. So let's go even deeper, and I will give you a practical example how we are implementing and utilizing 5G in the port environment, which is hosted by our partner Luka Koper, Port of Koper company in Slovenia. So in the Port of Koper, we have implemented and verified, let's say, several cutting-edge 5G capabilities. This includes we are deploying 5G network in both in non-standalone and in standalone modes with 5G slicing and QoS support. We are utilizing both private and public infrastructure. So private, of course, is provided by Telekom Slovenia, and in the case of private 5G, this is provided by our SME. So to ensure scalability and future-proof communications and compute infrastructure, we have adopted, let's say, this layered approach. This involves connecting the network and application layers through standardized and open interfaces, which enables a seamless integration and interoperability. As such, let's say, port ecosystem is more open, and as you can see it here on the slide, different partners such as Continental, Vicom Tech Institute, in our case, are able to bring and integrate different capabilities to the port ecosystem environment. With, let's say, this architecture modularity, we are ensuring the flexibility of the deployed system and that we are able to add new advanced modules also in the future. So this modularity also allows us to utilize, let's say, the same port assets such as video streaming camera on a crane or a video streaming camera on a drone for different use cases. And in this case, we can optimize, let's say, with the same asset and, let's say, compute and network capabilities and optimize logistic process or to support security surveillance. And in addition, and most importantly, there is no vendor lock-in. So which means that port team can actually replace communication and application modules or hardware assets without, let's say, breaking the final system. So let me show you some of the results of our private 5G system testing, where we are using 5G slicing with bandwidth assurance. Our massive machine type slice was configured with a GBR traffic profile, which means that we have defined the minimum, let's say, throughput bandwidth. In our case, was 9 megabits per second. And of course, you also need to define the maximum throughput in this case. In our case, it was 20 megabits per second. So in this case, we have ensured reliable and highly, let's say, performance connectivity for video streaming, let's say, transmission. And of course, we have assured, let's say, that service runs smoothly and continuously. Let's say, and finally, this is my, I would say, last technical slide. Let me introduce to you the flexibility of the network configuration using a base station operating on N70N frequency band in TDD mode, which was one of the mode already mentioned by our previous speaker. Basically, you can fully reconfigure the radio access network, the core network, which means that this enables almost seamless transition from downlink optimized to uplink optimized, let's say, throughput or to operation. And this can happen in less than 20 minutes, as you can see it here. And this is also one of the difference between using dedicated or commercial mobile networks as a practical example. So I'm pretty much sure you are aware that commercial networks are typically optimized for downlink throughput and may not, let's say, provide uplink performance optimization. So we came to my last slides, where I would like to point out some of the challenges that you will actually face when you will decide to go for the deployment of 5G, let's say, in the maritime environment or in the port. So basically, when considering the deployment models for the 5G, there are several options to choose from. We have heard you can use commercial network, private network, or you can combine hybrid approach, which means that you are combining the capabilities of both of them. The spectrum used for 5G can be operator-based, leased from other providers, or could be owned by the organization, which means that you actually own the spectrum. Frequencies and bandwidth can vary. So basically with bands such as 2.6 gigahertz, 3.6, 3.8 gigahertz. This was also mentioned by a previous speaker. And of course, what is more important is what kind of bandwidth you get with these frequencies. It can range from 20 megahertz of spectrum and actually up to 4 megahertz of spectrum. And of course, when it comes to USIM, this question is really important: who will actually provide and who will own them? Not to have, let's say, this provider lock-in capabilities. So the maturity and complexity of the technology are the key factor also which needs to be taken into consideration. Reliability, resilience, of course, and also cybersecurity measures are essential if you're actually moving over port operation, let's say, on top of the 5G. And of course, finally, evaluating the value for the money is important in terms of prices and cost-benefit analysis. So basically, we have reached my last slide. I firmly believe that 5G technologies, together with complementary services like AI, IoT, are crucial enablers, let's say, for these future European ports. I have mentioned already that over 70% of goods are actually being imported and exported through EU ports, which means investing in these technologies is essential, let's say, to maintain European competitiveness in the long run. So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that ports have the unique opportunity also to become a key driver in connecting various European vertical industries, including manufacturing, automotive, transport, and logistics. So by interconnecting of these, let's say, verticals, the potential to create new value chains will open basically something which doesn't exist today. And of course, new innovation will be driven, and of course, also economic growth from this perspective. So with this slide, I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to be here with you today. If you have any questions, of course, I will be really happy to answer you, but of course, you can also reach us over, let's say, social media, over email, etc., etc. So I wish you all a safe and insightful event, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sterle. If there are more questions, because I've seen one question for Dr. Petersen, and I've seen also the answer. So, of course, I can help. So when I'm talking about this type of services, always we include in our pilot sites a service provider. When, for instance, is needed to integrate, for instance, multimodality data. So especially for logistics service, when I'm talking about estimated time of arrivals, then we should include a data provider. And for instance, in Germany, we involved Dacosi. So it's a data provider for multimodality and linked, of course, to the ports and maritime operators data. So it's very important when if you are interested, of course, to integrate one or more service related to multimodality or related to any other kind of service, of course, you should also consider to involve any kind of stakeholders needed in order to have a full supply chain. Okay, because for local ports, of course, there are local service providers. But if we like to integrate with the hinterland services, if we like to integrate with multimodal services, synchromodality services, and so on, then, of course, we should invite in our team data providers, service providers, and so on. Of course, when we are talking about this type of specific services, AI services, machine learning, deep learning, this type of services, of course, to implement and to use to do this type of analytics, of course, we should involve with us data providers. So it's very important to highlight this aspect. But I have, I think, two questions, which I think are important for the attendees. So I received these two questions during the ITS Congress in Lisbon in May. So it's related mostly to business. And one question, of course, for both speakers: how 5G changed the future business ecosystem in maritime and in the port. So for the maritime, Dr. Petersen; for the ports area related, Dr. Sterle. And then the second question is, of course, is regarding the business benefits from the 5G network. And also, now we're also talking about the future beyond the 5G and the future 6G candidates technology. So let's try to give more details about, of course, how 5G technology will change the business ecosystem. You presented one slide about it, but I would like to give more details. So we start with Dr. Petersen, and then I will kindly invite Dr. Sterle. Please.
Yeah, thank you. So two questions. I'll see if I remember the first one, which was about business and ecosystem changes with 5G in maritime, of course. So what's interesting is that 5G is a standardized technology, which has a world span, and everybody is using it. So I think it will introduce some new players into the market, because before you've had dedicated communication systems for maritime. You have your own frequencies, you have had your own vendors. So now actually the telecom industry, which aims to enter different verticals, including maritime, might actually lead to increased competition. So you will have telecom entering the market. I guess the existing players within the connectivity market in maritime will have to either extend or enhance their products, maybe include 5G in their communication portfolio to keep up with the competition. Because as we've seen in all three presentations, the three of us believe that 5G is the future for connectivity within maritime, because it presents a high capacity communication system with high reliability, low latency. You can have IoT applications, and you can also have the ultra low latency part of it. So it's a common infrastructure that actually addresses a wide range of use cases within the maritime industry, and that includes harbors and also maritime communication. So from a business perspective, I think we're still in the early stages, and we haven't seen the ecosystems actually establish themselves yet. So what I see in my experience is that if you want to do 5G today, you have to ally yourself with one of the operators, because they are installing 5G for the consumer market. So they have 5G, and you can talk to them and you will get some slices of 5G. On the private 5G market, that's brand new. And there are some telecom vendors, like the suppliers of the infrastructure, like Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, ZTE, and others are trying to enter the private 5G market, but the business models are not in place. The equipment so far, from a private perspective, is quite expensive on the the purchase, and they also have some operation models where they act like some sort of mobile network provider. So the ones that sell you your 5G network also want to operate your network. So you, in addition to the capital expenditure, you also have an operating cost that's quite high. So I think for today, if you want to do, for example, harbor operations with 5G, you need to rely on the mobile operators. I think that will change in the future when the technology matures, when you get more technology in the market. You will probably have new players in the market, small and medium enterprises entering this, specializing, for example, in maritime communication with 5G. And they will, I think, be able to compete on price and, let's say, features and other things with the mobile operators. It's a very interesting ecosystem to see, and we're still in the early development. So I think it's very difficult to predict what the future will hold, but I think 5G will be there in the center, as in this figure. And which companies and which vendors and the role of the network operators and the role of the private networks within different use cases and different uses, both within harbor and maritime communication, it remains to be seen. But I think it's probably smart to start with 5G now to be ready for when it really takes off. So I think that was the first question.
Thank you very
I've
much.
forgotten the second question, but
yes, for the business model. 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. I think it relates to what I said earlier, that the business models are not in place yet. We don't know the cost of slicing. I think the mobile network operators doing pilots now. It's not on the business side. You're not paying for it. You have them there as your ally, so to speak, and you're not paying anything. So it remains to see what it will cost. What will be the cost of a slice compared to the cost of buying private infrastructure, for example. And I think per today, it's not possible to say that, actually. What will it cost to, let's say, have 100 megabit reserved in the public network? Who knows? I don't think even the mobile network operators know as of today. So I think it's a bit early to say the business models.
Yes, I think so. And we also, of course, started to develop this type of new business model, but I expect to have results early, the earliest results beginning of next year. So Dr. Sterle, first question regarding the impact of the 5G on the business ecosystem. And second question, if you have some ideas about the new business models.
Yeah, I will try to be really fast because I know that we are lacking of time. I think it was a lot of said already by Dr. Stig. So, but I would like to emphasize two main messages. The first one is digitalization. The second one is automation. Basically, first, what you need to do is digitalization of the port. So you need to have this automated way how you are collecting different, let's say, metrics, or how you're collecting, metrics. Could be operational metrics, could be of the assets, could be metrics of the transported, let's say, goods and services. So basically, this is the first step. The idea is to do the digitalization. And after that, when you will have a lot of, let's say, this data, what will the 5G do with this data? Nothing. You need to extend the 5G with additional capabilities. As we have already said, you need to have intelligent, industrial-grade IoT devices. You need to have, smart algorithms such as AI, deep learning, stuff like that, which will take this information and maybe in the first step do, automation of the processes which are doing now, let's say, manually. This is a huge added value. As I mentioned it before, if you're not doing this manually anymore, it is faster, you can be more productive, there are less errors and stuff like that. And after that, of course, ports will become a big Google clouds, I would say. They will have a lot of, let's say, information. And out of that, of course, there will be a lot of opportunities for, I would say, for small companies to take this data and to show the ports when can they, let's say, optimize the operational process, how to lower, let's say, different green stuff, which we have heard today many times, how to be sustainable in long run. Because there are, let's say, lots of options how to do this automation. I can just give you one example. Let's say Port of Koper is one of the biggest Mediterranean ports for the transshipments of the cars from the single port operator perspective. So basically, this is done currently manually, which means that cars are, let's say, driven to the ship and vice versa manually. So this is complicated and time-consuming work. Imagine that you have all this fancy stuff which is coming from 5G, vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure communications. We already have electrical cars. They are almost self-driving cars. Why don't they drive automatically from the ship to the yard and vice versa? And stuff like that. So basically, there are a lot of opportunities when you start to integrate that kind of technology. Of course, this technology, which is currently on the market and you can buy, cannot provide you these fancy features, which I mentioned, not yet. But that's why, and also it is not enough that only port implement vehicle-to-vehicle or vehicle-to-infrastructure, let's say, capabilities. It needs to be supported on the whole value chain, from the manufacturing through the transport to the end port and vice versa. So that would be really quickly from my side.
Thank you very much. So I fully agree that, of course, it's needed this type of AI-enabled network services. because this will help to integrate also artificial intelligence and machine learning into network operation, enable more efficient and intelligent network management, optimization, better network security, and so on. Massive MIMO, so multiple input, multiple output technology. Also, I assume this will be one of the next step. Together with dynamic spectrum access. Of course, there are a number of other candidates technology that, of course, will be tested in the near future, but I think we already highlighted, I think, the most important. So in order to conclude, so we have heard today which are the main challenges, and it is difficult to describe such a challenge, of course. For the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow. I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for attending our event.
Thank you very much also from my side.
Yeah, and thank you from my side as well.